See, because like I know you really well, so it's like funny. It's like, I'm like trying to jump into professional voice, and I'm like, what is Pardees? So, all right. Hello, builders. My name is G. I've got an amazing guest here on the pod today, the queen of go-to-market, a longtime member of the Boston startup community, and someone who I think is just a really great, positive, source of energy and good vibes. And I'm just happy to have her on the podcast, and we're going to be talking about her life, because I think she's so humble to not really talk much about her life for the most part. And so just to kind of both get some learning from all of her life, all the good things that happen. I'm sure there's also some mistakes, just like one or two or so, right? Yeah. More or less, right? Lessons. And hopefully be able to have some stuff to both motivate a new generation of people to also be working in the startup industry, not just like directly as founders, but also founder adjacent as well, which I think is something that I've been kind of growing more and more appreciative of. So thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
I'm super excited. I wanted to I always start with like the upbringing, because I think that that's like nature versus nurture. It's always like a really interesting like thing for me to dive into. And so really, were there any like indications of entrepreneurship when you were younger, like lemonade stand, like the cliche, or was it?
Yes, if it wasn't the lemonade stand, that was my baby sister. She had the lemonade stand.
Yeah. I should have her on the pod.
I know, you can bring her on next. But for me, it was babysitting and horseback riding were the two entrepreneurial things I really did. And babysitting was because I had a sister who was 5 years younger than me, and it was like the perfect age gap for babysitting. And all her friends' moms would watch me play with the kids and be like, hey, can you babysit for us too? And I'd be like, yeah, sure. And that's what kind of started with my babysitting empire that I like to talk about and say. And it wasn't a real empire, but I babysat for like most of the kids in the neighborhood. I would compete with the neighbors for the families and who they would call first, which was pretty fun. And then my middle sister was a year younger than me. I always like joke that she was like the first employee that I managed, because I used to have her with me on the babysitting. Sometimes she would fall asleep and I would get mad at her. Sometimes we would have to split our babysitting duties because we had multiple families asking for us at the same time. So I would have her deployed at another family, I would be at another one. We used to split everything together afterwards. Yeah, that was fun. And then for horseback riding, I'm like an adrenaline junkie. So I started horseback riding when I was like 4 or 5 years old. My teachers realized I was like really light because I was like really little, and so they used to start putting me on like all these horses that were hard to ride, but because the horses couldn't feel me on their back, they wouldn't freak out, which worked out pretty well until the first day I fell off the horse. And that was sad, and while I was on the ground like writhing in pain trying to figure out like how this happened to me, I overheard the teachers saying that they have to actually sell the horse. And then when I told my mom, they have to sell the horse because I fell off the horse. And my mom was like, wait a minute, why are you the one that's making them sell the horse? And I was like, I don't know, let's go ask them. So my mom went and like asked them, and she was like, hey, like, what? I overheard you talking about selling the horse. And like, oh yeah, your daughter can't ride the horse, so then we don't want her to, like, we don't want the horse to be there because no other kid can ride the horse. And then my mom was like, we're paying for these lessons, like, how dare you put my daughter in danger, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I don't mind doing it, but you have to pay me to do it. And they were like, oh, okay. So then we made a deal that I could ride the horses that were in training, and then I would get a good horse when I did my lessons, and I used to go after school and ride horses.
Oh, I love the hustle.
Yeah.
But I will say, was selling the horse like the horse is going up to pasture?
I have no idea. I actually don't know what that means.
Factory.
I'm hoping it would be like someone else would take the horse and give it a nice home and take care of it and teach it better. But no one's ever said that when I told the horse story.
No, I'm just unique that way.
Well, in my world, the horse lived a great life. And eventually could be ridden by kids.
Sure, mine too.
That's the positive outlook you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. Don't live in my world. Yeah, exactly. So speaking of your world, right? So obviously entrepreneurial upbringing and almost kind of like outside of the box thinking in some ways, and the willingness to kind of like go above and beyond, especially like being able to own an entire street of babysitting, right? I mean, obviously like initiative from a young age. When you went to BC, right? Go Eagles.
Yes, Eagles.
Yes. I'm trying to, yeah.
Yeah.
Eags?
Yeah, we used to call them Eags. We had Eagle Bucks, and we used to call them Eags.
Nice.
When we were there, yeah.
Was that at the football games?
Yeah, and just around campus, there were certain stores that would actually like take Eagle Bucks, and you could use those.
The Eags Bucks.
Yeah.
There we go. What did you major in BC?
Theater and communications.
Theater and communications.
With a bio minor.
I think the audience can definitely tell. Theater and communications.
Yep.
Seems apt. Did you feel like it prepared you, being an entrepreneur and maybe like being like a component of the startup industry?
Funny enough, the theater major prepared me more than the communications major. But the communications major helped me be like really well, like spoken and manipulative, like in the right way. So all my marketing campaigns that I run. The theater major was like really like outside the box thinking, like going down the creative process. We actually studied Google Sprints inside one of my stage management classes. So I was like, what's that word? I haven't taken one of those in a long time. Classes that I had, and that's what actually made me interested in tech, was like going through that to basically put together a stage design. And I was like, how do you do this in real life? And then I was like, oh, it's Google. I'm like, oh, I want to work at Google, which I never actually got to work at Google, which is fine. It's probably for the best.
Yeah.
But I'm in tech.
Yeah.
Yeah, so was I prepared? Maybe. Did I like it? Yes. Did it give me, would I have been in tech if I wasn't in theater? Probably not.
So were you a part of like plays and stuff? Like I had no
Oh
clue.
yeah. Yeah, I was a stage manager, I was a lighting designer, I did stand-up comedy and like sketch comedy, which was like my two favorite things to do. Yeah.
So like improv?
Like a lot of improv, a little like
Nice.
thinking on your feet. And like just like studying like creative processes and like how do you actually get something off the ground from 0 to 1 or 100. We did that multiple times whenever we did a show. So yeah, and then I learned on my social media in the beginning to promote my theater shows that we were putting on campus.
Side tangent, Keith Boyd, famous investor, says that, you know, one of his like ways of looking at building a startup is to kind of look at it like building a movie where someone comes up with a vision, writes up the script for what they think should happen, and then just go out and like do the film, which I think in some ways is kind of different from like poll the audience, right? If you were to still use the movie analogy, like a lot of people are like, go out, do your customer interviews, figure out what needs to be done and all that type of stuff. Like I wonder, looking at your like theater background and like how it kind of works within that realm. I know like we're kind of like looking back here, but you know, what do you think like can be learned from like these different approaches?
Well, so we never polled the audience before we put a show on, but we did get audience feedback before we put our shows on, and people would either be excited about the show or not excited about the show. We used to do trailers and stuff to get people amped up about it too. But definitely like just coming up with like having a vision, having a script, and then bringing that script to life. It is almost like having your own startup. It lasts a lot shorter than a startup does.
And I think that kind of theatrical nature, like that's something that like Steve Jobs is like really known for, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like trying to be like the showman on the stage. Like it almost feels like it comes out of like, you know, a Shakespearean play in some ways, right? He's the main character, he walks out,
the TED Talks.
great reveal, exactly.
Yeah.
And so, you know, maybe there is like, maybe there should be more theater majors thinking about being founders and being
I think so. Yeah, because then you think of things from really outside the box because you live outside the box most of the time when you're in those plays and shows and things. And then you're also good at thinking on your feet. You're also good at presenting. You're good at, you know, figuring out and like feeding off the crowd when you're giving presentations. And so I think all those are really helpful skills.
When you look back at like your upbringing and like preparing yourself going to school and then like getting your first job, What would be like your advice to someone who's like starting out in their career? I think that right now a lot of people are like very anxious, like a lot of tech layoffs going on at the time of this recording, and just getting started feels like the bar is kind of been consistently raised. What do you think?
It's rough. When I graduated, it was 2010, so it was problematic because it was like 2008 had just happened, and then we were competing with all the grads from 2008, 2009, 2010, trying to get jobs. The way I actually got my job was my dad took my resume and he forwarded it to all his friends, who then forwarded it to all their friends, who then forwarded it to all their friends, and after like so many forwards, I got a call from someone like out of the blue, and I got an internship from that job. And then it just happened that one of the people who worked there, she decided to leave and move to DC, so I was able to take her job after she left, and I was already trained, so that kind of worked out and was kind of lucky. For the kids, I guess, out there, nothing matters is what I tell a lot of people. Like, I remember when I was doing a lot of like Facebook marketing in college, and people used to joke and be like, what are you going to do for your life? Like Facebook? And I was like, yeah, I don't know. But I ended up doing Facebook. But back then, that wasn't even a job that you could have. Like, no one was paying someone to manage a Facebook page or do Facebook ads. Facebook ads didn't even exist back then. So it's more like, just like roll with the punches, see what's happening, do a lot of informational interviews is what I did to try to figure out what I wanted to do and would help me get ready for the real interview. So I used to just go on LinkedIn. You can still do this today. I would go on LinkedIn and message people from my school who had the jobs I wanted to have. And just be like, hey, I'm graduated from Boston College. I saw you went there too. Would love to hear more about your story. Can you take me out for a coffee? And they would say, yeah. And they would pay for the coffee too, which is really nice.
Well, they had the job. So,
yeah, they were the ones with the job. And that's how I just like was like bouncing around from like one spot to another spot, and none of these people ended up hiring me, but I learned a lot about what they did, and I was able to present better at my interviews to do that. And like most people from alumni networks are tight, so it's really easy to contact anyone today. I would leave it at that.
I see a lot of people online, especially griping about like the state of like, I don't want to call them kids, but kids going in and like interviews and stuff, and like the quality of like not showing up properly dressed, not showing up on time, not like being very present, like no eye contact, no presence in interviews. And I'm just wondering, like, how much do you think like not just like COVID and the Zoom environments has affected that, but also just like, have we become more socially awkward as an industry? Like, because like, I think that, I don't know, like, some of those things obviously I think should matter, right? But I think that if we're not setting people up for success in those things, right? Then I worry that it's just going to become more of like a trough of despair, because no one as an adult is going to get fixed on that type of stuff, right? Like, there's no parent to be like, like looking in the eyes as you talk.
Yeah, I'm that interviewer who will call you out while you're being interviewed and be like, hey, what are you, why don't you make eye contact? Yeah. And just being really curious about it. But I haven't interviewed that many people from the COVID era, so I can't really speak to them. All the kids, I call you all kids. All the people I've spoken to that have just graduated have always been like very well kept. They're like more of the go-getters though, that like message me and wanted to talk to me about something or ask me about my career or get some advice on something. So I never had a problem with that. I don't know. I really hope, going on an informational interview, hopefully they'll tell you how to dress and make eye contact and stuff. But I went to Boston College and they used to prepare us and prep us to do it. I'm sure they still do, but I'm interested to see how it looks on Zoom or something else.
As a computer science major at UMass Lowell, we had a class called Oral and Written Communications for CS.
Oh, really?
Obviously felt like it was very needed for CS majors. It was just like, oh, you're awkward.
People 101.
Yeah. Like, how do you give a presentation? How do you actually talk like a normal person, right? It was like level setting with like a lot of people, and I thought, I was like, look, some majors, they might be like, we're good, we don't need that, and then you're like,
I think everyone needs that. It's helpful. It's good to know. Because I was a communications major, I took a lot of like public speaking classes because I just liked it. So I took like the ones that I could take more of them. A lot of advertising classes that required us to do presentations, and our advertising teacher would bring in her colleagues from the space too, which was really cool. So we got to meet with like D'Angelo's marketing team, for example, and then she told us how to dress and how to make eye contact and everything before they even came in, so we don't embarrass her. But which is helpful to know, you know. Like, anything is helpful. Yeah, I don't know. That's really interesting.
I never actually like interviewed for a formal job. So
yeah.
I think other than Techstars and then a bunch of other stuff, but I never actually like, other than like college, that initial like jump into Techstars, like it's just like startups and just all that stuff. So I don't think I've ever like done it. I've interviewed people, and like just from my perspective, right? I think that, you know, it's so funny in a founder interview because you don't really know what you're doing. Right? You're just like, I don't know what I want this person to do. I just need more bodies now at this point. Like, people to actually get stuff. So it's certainly very interesting. And I think like in some cases, like the interviewee just being like as nervous, or sorry, the interviewer is just as nervous as the interviewee. And so sometimes you might like clue into some of that stuff sometimes. Certainly very interesting. You mentioned Facebook earlier, which I thought was very interesting, because when you were mentioning about your time, I won't say much stuff about like what I was doing on Facebook, other than playing like Cityville or something, Farmville.
Oh yeah. All the games.
All the games, because that's probably the only thing I was doing at that point with Facebook. You basically started your career off in PR, and then eventually evolved into like kind of a marketer.
Yeah.
Right? And kind of seeing that intersection of both PR and marketing and how it reaches into like social media.
Yeah.
You basically grew up just as social media was also growing. What was that like?
It was fun. So I feel that for everyone today who has to learn like TikTok, Snapchat, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, like as like all at once. I'm like, holy crap. Because you can take like classes on these things now. But when I was coming up, Facebook was a thing. Twitter became a thing in like 2007. So then I started like learning about it like 2009. I started making Twitter pages for people. Then LinkedIn came up like after I graduated college. And I used to tweet at people to tell them that they needed to be on LinkedIn and that they should pay me to help them figure out how to be on LinkedIn. And that used to work. People would be like, oh yeah, what is LinkedIn? And I love social media because you can talk to anybody on there. I'm like, this thing is so powerful. I could message like Satya Nadella if I wanted to. I mean, he probably won't respond. I could message Obama if I wanted to, but he probably won't respond, but I still could. But you know, it's so powerful to be able to like get to anyone from anywhere. Where beforehand, it was still very gated to get in front of people. And I think that's what really drew me to it. And then from a PR perspective, like when social media first started, the PR agencies were the ones that used to do the communication strategy, and that used to be on social media. Now social media has kind of morphed into its own thing, and I think more people put it under advertising now because of all the advertising dollars that can go to it than anything. So it's kind of been pulled out of PR a little bit and more like onto like your normal marketing advertising team that's there, and I kind of morphed along with it. Where I used to do like press releases and social media management for startups, and then I just did social media management. Then I started doing more like what you call today the go-to-market strategy. And like social media was always a part of what I did, but it became less of like the only thing that I did as I kind of progressed in my career.
And you eventually like started your own like agency.
I did.
And stuff.
Yeah.
I think that was when I kind of first started getting to know you like a while back.
Yeah.
It was like you working on that. What was that like going out, starting your own agency, and like just driving?
It was interesting. So I started consulting, and then my consulting basically blew up in 3 months, like in a good way, which is nice. And so everyone wanted to work with me. I was turning down contracts. I didn't know what to do. I should have just hiked my prices, but I decided let me go the agency route and do that instead, which today I would not do starting out, but that's okay. When you're young and reckless, all the things that you could do. But it was stressful in the beginning because I was trying to figure out, like, I have all these people, I have all these things, how do I kind of get working together? And it was kind of like more like, it felt like I was like cobbling something together with duct tape over and over again, and just like trying like new variations of getting that going. Yeah, stressful was definitely like the word that I would use there. for most of it. But it was also fun. I got to talk to people in a new way. I learned a lot of new skills I would not have learned if I had not done it. So I don't regret doing it. I just moved too fast, which was like my only problem. I should have just like stayed. I wish I'd stayed more as a consultant before and saved a bunch of money before launching the agency.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So you're saying that it was like capital intensive to run the marketing agency?
Yeah, it was capital intensive, and most marketers don't know how to track their time because they're like creative people and they're not operations people. And so teaching them how to do all that and getting the right things and balancing their paycheck with what the customer was paying, with what the customer was willing to pay versus what they wanted to get paid, and just negotiating across both sides is like very difficult for me. Kind of learning how to do that whole thing.
Do you think it was because at that stage of your career, you probably were better off as just being like a doer and as a consultant, just kind of managing yourself as opposed to being sort of a delegator? And then
Yeah, I'm not a good manager, which I didn't know. I'm terrible at management. So in the future, I would have saved a bunch of money, hired an operations person who's actually good at marketing. I hired an operations person, but he wasn't good at marketing. And I would have had like, and again, it's like what you were saying, where like when you're a founder, you're first starting with these job roles, you don't know what you're looking for. And the only way that you would know what you're looking for is by messing it up a few times, and then you're like, oh no, after I mess this thing up like 4 or 5 times, now I know exactly what that role should be. And it happens more often than not, because like how many people are correct the first time around when they're doing something? Not many people are that lucky, which is unfortunate. But I learned a lot. I learned a lot about like finances. I learned accounting. I basically learned, because I didn't know any of those skills when I first started. I learned about operations. I learned about tracking time and managing people and that whole thing. But yeah, if I ever do it again, which I probably will, definitely getting an operations person to do all the people management side of things, and then I can do more sales, marketing, account management type stuff.
When you compare like an agency to like a traditional startup, what would you say are like going out and actually like doing it?
Yeah.
What would be like the differences in your?
I make money a lot faster than all the startups. So I made money from day one. Like my first year, I made $350,000 in revenue. Most startups don't have that. Yeah, that's like the major one. And then the other one is like your what do you call them? Your COGS are a lot different than your startup COGS, and your gross profit margin is a lot less than the startup's gross profit margin. So scaling becomes very difficult because you're not just like selling one thing over and over again at like 90% profit margin, making money and moving on. You're like delivering projects. And then as you deliver the projects, you have to make sure that all the new people that you hire are able to be at the same profit margin as the people you had before. And your people are your product. It's not, people don't want to work with you, they want to work with your people. And then the product, people want to use your product. So it's like a little bit of a different thing.
It's really interesting, and I mean, obviously, like building a software product that obviously helps with like doing the profit margin. Obviously, it's way cheaper labor cost versus cost of infrastructure, and then scaling technology is a lot easier than necessarily scaling people. I think I remember someone actually making a comparison that like agency to startup is like the difference between running a Walmart and running a restaurant, right? And the agency being the restaurant and Walmart being something that
you can just grab something and go.
You just add more aisles and away it goes, right? All that type of stuff. And I think that, kind of we're going this conversation about like starting different businesses. You're generally considered like one of the best go-to-market strategists in Boston. And like, I'm just thinking like, if you were to start a startup, right, do you have like a particular strategy already in mind when it comes to go-to-market? Is it dependent on different things? What is your process, I guess?
Yeah, so I always start with like SEO and just looking at who else is talking about the right things. I like SEO, even though it's like, jury's out, Google will still be around in 10 years, which is crazy. But you get to see like what are people competing for and what are they buying from like an advertising perspective, both on all the keywords that you're going after and all the words that you're using. And then how are those words that people are using today relate to the words your customers are using when you're doing your customer interviews, which you should be doing. And kind of like finding, like I kind of try to find like a middle ground between that. And then basically based on what I call the Steve Blank squares. You know, like the crisscross he has, and it's like a new market, new product or existing product, existing market. I have a different way of strategizing go to market for each of those, depending on the market and your product and how much competition you have.
Interesting.
And how people will know about it.
And just like in terms of, go to market recently, I think like a lot of people were discussing whether or not it was like a ZERP thing or a not ZERP thing about like community-led go to market and growth. And so like people used to say like, oh, just build a community and then build your startup along with it. That was like one of those things. But some people are challenging that, saying that like, oh, that was just because you raised a bunch of money and then went out and did that. I'm just wondering, like, what are your thoughts on that?
On community growth, it takes longer. So you're basically, if you're growing a community and growing a startup, you're basically growing two startups at the same time. And one's a little bit easier to grow because maybe people will join your community because they like the people that are there. And again, it's like the agency. The people in the community are your product. Whereas your product is your product. And so I've seen some startups that I don't think should only exist because they have that community aspect part of them. And the community's kind of buoying them up a little bit and keeping them afloat. I say if you have the money to, like, if you have the runway to do it, then sure, do it. But if you have a shortened runway, I wouldn't grow a community first because it's not going to last.
What's your go-to for like building a community? I think that like certain tech sectors are just like stick everyone in a Discord and that's a community. Like, what do you
or people use Slack channels or WhatsApp channels or whatever have you, or there's community technology that you can also buy. I don't know. I don't think it matters. I think start in person, honestly. Start with like a spreadsheet in person, like there, and see if that has any legs and people actually want to meet again. If they do want to meet again, then figure out where they want to meet and just go with that. And let your community lead the community and tell them what to do. Because the more of the community you can get to actually take ownership for what you're doing, the more likely your community is going to grow without you having to grow it, which will put something off your plate. And I found you need that.
What do you think is like a thing that you hear that some people talk about go to market that you're just like, I vehemently disagree with that?
Ooh, I'm trying to think.
I think that you're generally a very agreeable person. So
I can find a reason why anything should be successful or like should be, but like I usually will be like, but only for these types of people. Like the whole thing, I was trying to think. Because I call them like the rich people startups. And sometimes I'm like, these ideas will work if you're rich. Like growing a community will work if you have runway and you're rich enough to like last long enough for that community to kind of make it work. Or, if that community is rich enough to keep you going, then I guess that could be another way of making that work. Like ecosystem partnerships, they could work if you have the right startup that needs the ecosystem, and your partners actually know how to sell what you're doing. Right. A lot of times, like people are like, I'm gonna go channel first, and like the channel probably won't know how to sell you. Good luck. Like I don't know how that's gonna work.
Channel partnerships and whatnot.
Yeah, unless it's like something that's like, oh, it's almost like this thing was slightly different, and all these people. Oh my god, my voice. Hang on.
You okay?
I don't know what happened. And like, sorry, they're like, oh, it's like people, if they don't know how to sell your startup, you're not going to be able to have an army of channel people selling your startup unless you train them all on how to do it, how to have those conversations, how to map that conversation out. And then you have to make all this channel material that goes with it, and that's a lot more work than a lot of people think.
When do you think that startups, considering that you've kind of been seen both sides of it, right? Like, when should a startup engage an agency? Because sometimes for me, whenever I see like a very early startup using an agency, I start I'm like, oh no.
I mean, if you can afford it, then that's fine. Again, rich people startups.
That's
if you can, I mean, the nice thing about working with an agency is that they should be able to build it the right way. The first time around, you kind of de-risk a little bit of what you're working on if you're working with the right one, and they can kind of get you to the point A to point B a little bit faster. But then you do pay for it with money. Does it make sense at the beginning? I've seen some startups do that at the very beginning and be very successful. I've seen some startups at the beginning and then they don't have money for anything else because they didn't actually think about, what's my marketing and sales budget? Like I met people that spent $300,000 on an agency building their product out, and then they came to me and were like, okay, what about marketing? I'm like, well, marketing is still another $150,000 for the first year, including advertising and people, if you really want to get in front of them and be aggressive about it. And they're like, oh, we didn't think about that. How about $10,000? And I have to be like, that's like a campaign that you can run on your own without me.
Because I'm here with Pardees, I feel like my hot takes get to come out.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but like I'm like, if you hired an agency to, for example, like create your pitch deck, I'm like, I don't think you're gonna make it. It's just kind of.
I mean, a lot of them have a lot of money and they don't have to. I mean, I've seen a lot of second-time founders do this well.
That's just being lazy.
I mean, if they were like, they had a good exit, they like the idea of building a business, they don't want to build a business anymore, and they're at a leisure to pay for other people, and they get to like support the community, then why not?
I feel like the quintessential part of running business sometimes, and I mean, you felt it, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes needing to suffer. And like,
but what if you don't have to suffer? That's nice.
Then when you do suffer, you're like, oh, this is like a new sensation again. Sometimes I feel like if it's just, you just get numb to it at some point. And I feel like that's like something that's like emblematic of success sometimes.
Yeah.
Like you're just kind of like always in the stress points, so that you're like, when it actually comes for real, you're like, well, it's just another day sometimes.
Yeah, but I've seen people who like just really like product and they really like to like play with product, build new features, the whole customer journey on their own. And they're not good at doing the pitch deck, or they're not good at doing the marketing side of things, or they don't want to pay for they don't want to wait for like their CTO to hire 5 engineers to build a product for them. They want to just get to market and test it out and then get it acquired right away. And that's a strategy.
Yeah.
It's just, it takes more capital. It's a capital-intensive strategy that could pay out if you do it right.
Money in, money out, I guess. Sometimes.
Exactly.
Well, you just joined a new company.
I did.
A venture studio, and
a product agency with a venture studio.
Right.
Yeah. 2
of them. So, tell me about it, and just because I don't know too much about it, and I've kind of saved myself. I didn't do much research. And I want to hear it straight from you.
Yeah.
Where are you working at, and what does it do?
Okay, so I'm working at Smashing Boxes, and we are a design-led product agency that specializes in getting startups, enterprise research over to market by building their product out. Then we also have a venture studio that we can wrap the product agency in, and depending on the startup, we'll sometimes go in as a co-founder, sometimes we're the strategist, sometimes we're the technical co-founder, but it just lets us add more strategy to what we're actually doing, so we're building a business and not like just delivering product. That's our big thing.
Got it. And I think like, especially around here in Boston, I don't think there are too many like venture studios.
They're coming up now.
You think?
It started, like C10 Labs just started. Raise and Labs has some sort of venture studio part of things now that they're running. I'm starting to see it crop up more here.
And maybe it's like I think it's always been like.
Oh, York IE, they're our big one.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe it's an emerging thing.
I think it's an emerging thing.
This has been so ingrained in like Silicon Valley, like science and some of the other like famous venture studios there. I think I just thought of one, Paul English's venture studios.
Oh yeah.
Kind of like his mad scientist lab.
Yes, it's probably cool.
Yeah. Rich people startups. Sometimes.
Yeah.
What do you think like is the best kind of type of person to engage with a venture studio?
Yeah.
And like create the best result there.
So for us, it's a lot of like subject matter experts in the healthcare space that are like our best venture studio people. Like they're nurses, they're doctors, they don't want to become a full-time entrepreneur, they're like not into the startup, but they have an idea that they invented somehow, either through research at like Duke University or like NC State or one of those like universities down, because we're based in North Carolina, so it's like down there. Or they were running their own office, and through realizing some sort of like operational efficiency in their office, they realized they could build a product out of it. But they don't want to become an entrepreneur full time. They don't want to build out a whole product and go on that journey, but they want to have like a front row seat without like all the risk involved with it. basically. And so we come on, we work with them as their co-founder, and then we give them the capital. We do take a nice slice of equity to do that, but they don't, in exchange, they're not worrying about like the whole suffering and the founder's journey that you were just talking about before. And so they should have an easier time getting to market.
Needless to say, I hope that not every founder goes through immense suffering.
I feel like you have to.
But I feel like
there's no way not to.
So I mean, like, I think that like taking some things off someone's plate is not like to take away from like the day-to-day grind necessarily.
Right.
But I mean, there's healthy grind and there's not healthy grind.
Exactly.
Right? And so I only wish that could extend to like my gym life. Like, can someone lift? Can someone do like the sit-ups for me? Because I really don't want to do that. No,
you gotta do it.
So life is long, as I'm sure you well know. What's kind of like in the future for Pardees? Like what are you thinking about in the future for yourself?
I have no idea. I have no clue.
You don't think like
I usually, because I'm Persian, I usually have a 5-year and 10-year plan.
Yeah.
But I like reached the end of my 5-year plan with like my go-to-market agency, and then exited that. And now I'm kind of like, I don't know, it's like free space because I'm like not 40 yet. So I'm just like, what do I do in the next like 4 years? So yeah, jury's out for me on myself. I'm kind of thinking about like, do I do some investing? I'm trying to like save a bunch of money right now. I'm trying to figure out like what my family life looks like. I think I'm going to be spending more time on like figuring out my family life the next 4 years than like my career life. And just kind of like putting the career, like I like where I'm at right now. Yeah, and it's pretty fun. And then maybe one day I'll start a SaaS company. But probably when I'm like 45 or something. So I have like 10 years before
just find the next bubble and like,
I'm waiting for the market to pick back up.
That's certainly fair. I mean, like, and what do you think about like because like I think like a lot of traditionally, like we've kind of looked at like, young entrepreneurs, that's kind of where like startups are made. But really, like, data has shown that people go in their 40s and 50s are the ones who are actually like making the outsized like amounts of successful like unicorns and other types of startups. So I don't know, are you looking out for that type of like?
Probably. I have a few engineering friends and they know who they are, who are probably working on some things. I also have a lot of opportunity with Smashing Boxes in the Venture Studio to kind of go wherever my heart wants to go, which is kind of nice. So I'm just going to hang out here for a little bit and get to know the market more, get to know the team more, and kind of grow it out and see what happens.
What's been traditionally your like relation to like investors within the startup community? Have you ever thought like maybe I'll try to go into VC land one day, or
maybe?
Kind of like,
I like them. I'm not as number focused as they are. I've been more investing from the heart than with like all the numbers that they have. But I don't know. I definitely want to try angel investing. And like investing with a group probably the next 5-6 years. I definitely want to. I don't know if I'd ever work for a VC though. Sorry, VCs. I like you guys though.
I mean, there's also like probably a lot of like different scout programs that you could probably look at too, right? Where they give you a little bit of money and then you go off and vote with your dollars on different people, right? Always found that to be something particularly interesting. So kind of looking at kind of wrapping everything up in a bow. If you were to start another startup, and let's say that it is a boring enterprise SaaS company, because I'm trying to get you going on this, get you motivated to go do it. When you're ready to do so, right? Don't wait too long, because I don't know if AI is going to eat your lunch there. No. But if you were to like just pretend that you are building an enterprise SaaS company, right? What would be your go-to-market strategy for that?
Well, it depends on the type of company again.
Okay, let's just come up with an example then.
I don't think about it.
Help your podcast host out.
I know, sorry. So if it was in cloud or AI, let's just say it's an AI because everyone's building an AI startup right now. We would figure out, is it a thing that's going to change the way people do something, like really specifically, or is it a thing that has to do with something else? If it's the thing that's going to change the way that people do something, you have to deal with like the changing the hearts and minds strategy, which is a lot of like in LinkedIn influencing, a lot of podcasting, a lot of like speaking at events and stuff and showing off that you're like a good person that you should follow. You're a visionary leader. If you follow my startup, then you too will be visionary. That's like the kind of, no, seriously though, like that's the kind of thing you do. If you're changing too much, if it's like, oh, before we used to like all eat sandwiches and now we're like shooting up the sandwiches, and this is like a terrible thing. This is terrible. But you know, if it's like we're doing something completely different than what we were doing before, then no one's gonna find you. Like there is no SEO strategy because no one's searching for how to do this thing completely differently. They just think life is the status quo. And the only time they're gonna think about something outside the box is if they're at a conference, or if they're on a podcast listening, or if they're like reading a book or something. They're not gonna be like, oh, I wonder if there was a better way to do accounting. Like no one's gonna do that. No one thinks like that. And then they're like, oh, let me find a new startup in accounting. Because I just love switching my like enterprise books and everything. Like no one likes to do that. If it's something that exists and it's like easy to, and it's like, oh, like we're gonna sit on top of your accounting software, so then we can go. That's when like the partnership might make sense because it's like, all right, let's sit on top of Xero, let's sit on top of QuickBooks, let's sit on top of Sage, let's make friends with all these people and like have them sell it, because if they sell our startups, then their people are gonna be like more ingrained on their app. And that makes more sense, and they should be better activated. And they can go to all their conferences and find other people there.
I think that one of the like kind of ways that I've been kind of also advocating for other people to also look at like some of their go-to-market strategy, and this also comes from like mature companies too, where their go-to-market strategy evolves into just their strategy in general, like their sales strategy or whatever. You know, that kind of becomes like, because it's so founder-led at the beginning, it then becomes like top of funnel later on down the line. And I think to your point, what you're saying a lot of is kind of like establishing someone, whether it be the actual CEO or, you know, some people aren't extroverted in that way, so maybe it's some form of company spokesperson, right? Yeah. To be the designated like industry leader. Put them out there as like establish their. It
has to be one of the founders.
You think so?
Yes.
Interesting.
You kind of lose it if you're not. But I've seen a lot of startups that are like in a certain space, like they're like in the edtech space, and neither of them are teachers. They then hire their first customer and make them a co-founder too. And you can do that. I mean, like the founding customer.
Yeah.
And you see a lot of those.
I think that it's also very interesting. I mean, also like some people will like hire a person and then kind of put them on a pedestal within an industry with the hopes of being like, hey, look, we kind of made the brand of this person. Right. And then be like, hey, don't you want to come in?
I've seen it work. I've seen it work well.
I think that like a lot of people, maybe it's a little bit of short-term thinking where it's like, oh, I'm so worried about losing the person and not realizing that like if this person actually leaves and then becomes like a successful person somewhere else,
it's still good for you. And then if they do leave, then you have to find another person that's just like them and also put them up there on the pedestal and keep it going. That's why it's easier for some of the founders because they have more skin in the game.
And they're not going to leave.
Yeah, I mean, they may leave, but they're less likely to.
That's also fair. Well, unfortunately, it is time for us to leave our amazing audience.
Aww.
I really appreciate you spending the time here, and if you also appreciated what Pardees has offered today in terms of tactical knowledge, I would really like to say today, how can people get in touch with you?
Find me on LinkedIn and mention the podcast because I get a lot of weird LinkedIn messages from people. We're trying to do sales probably all the time. So if you mention the podcast, you will be accepted immediately. If not, I may have to decide if I like you or not, which may not work out in your favor.
The G Can Learn podcast.
There we go.
Link. Where I definitely learned a lot today. I definitely think that, you're going to make some people self-conscious about their outreach messages now. Congratulations. And be like, is this weird? But hopefully you really appreciated the conversation today, kind of a more relaxed one, just because Pardees has that effect on people.
Very casual.
Yes, and just wanted to remind everyone that if G can learn, so can you. Go out and meet amazing people to learn from and grow and have an open mind and have awesome conversations. Thank you so much for watching. Until the next episode.
Yay!
Awesome.